This is sort of a debrief on the two-person overboard off the yacht Blue in the 2025 Possession Point race in Seattle. Um, it was a little over 8 months ago, and yeah, so here we go. It was a downwind start. The wind was blowing in the mid-teens. The wind forecast was 15 to 20. Um, we launched and got off the start with an A2, and we're sailing along going in a northerly direction, and everything was great. The wind was slowly building from the mid-teens to say the low 20s, and the boat was going faster and faster and super controllable. We were doing multiple jibes, no issues. And the boat was new to the sailing team. The boat's been around for a number of years, and a few of us have sailed on it in the past. But Ian is the owner. Had currently or recently bought it, and this was the first season that we were sailing. So a lot of the people on board, this was their first time with any wind. We had been sailing, but it all been lighter air. As we sailed along about an hour into the race, the wind continued to build. And now we're starting to get puffs that are well outside the forecast range. Looking around, there was a cloud front line that was coming in. It was like, yeah, this is not looking like it's matching up with any of the forecasts. So as we got farther north, we're approaching a jibe to ley line. The wind is now in the low 20s. The boat's ripping along in the upper teens. And we're discussing looking for a lull to jibe in to make sure everything's fine. After the jibe, we would take the staysail down and then rig a letterbox and then get a jib up. And this was all going to be super early of the mark. And we're doing well in the race, and this seemed like the prudent thing to do. We pull the jibe off, it's no problem. The boat is extremely controllable, and we're all really impressed. We're ripping along. Okay, staysail down. They furl it, they put it away. All right, let's go jib up. Our bow person goes forward and undoes the fracculator and the sail tie. Our mast man runs up to the mast, and literally at that moment, we got hit with a huge puff. Looking at our strip charts later, the puff was 35 knots, and we were going 25 at that moment. At that moment, we dug into the back of a wave, and the boat literally stood on its nose, i.e., pitch poling. It drove straight down at this obscene downward angle at the bow, and I have a freeze frame picture in my mind looking down, and it's like the boat's like this. So the boat stops and then falls on its side, on its starboard side. Well, okay, not just foam and splash, but thick green water all the way up to the mast. Our mast man is about 6'4" or something to that range, and he had it up to the chest level on his bibs. Okay, so the sudden stop, the boat falls on its side. The jib now, because it had been untied and was just starting up, fills up like a bag of water. And in doing so, when the boat falls on its side, it rolls into the lifelines and it breaks the lifelines and the starboard part of the bow pulpit. In doing so, now there's zero leeward lifelines. Our bow person gets pushed aft by the water, and then the deck angle makes her fall to leeward and right into the water. The mast man gets pushed by the water and the sudden stoppage. He loses grip, falls in, and he falls to leeward. Well, so now the boat then slides over the top of both these people in the water. They literally went under the boat with the jib. All right. So now the boat kind of comes up a little bit. We're looking forward. There is nothing forward No people, no lifelines, no nothing. It's like magically transported away. So we look to weather and I see the heads pop up. We immediately yell, man overboard. Ian, who was driving, the boat owner, at that point just lets go of the wheel and he turns and he deploys the man overboard unit, the mom. So I grab the wheel and I look up and I yell at the closest person, our mast man, and tell him to swim to our bow person and stay together. Absolutely do not separate. And at that point, then we started our cleanup. Okay, great. The spinnaker's way off to leeward. I think, I'm not sure if the fore guy was released or it stretched so much or something and the Martin breaker tripped, but the kite was halyard and sheet only to the boat, flying off the leeward stern quarter. Um, the main was luffing, and the boat was at, whatever, 40 degrees of heel or something. It was 35 degrees of heel. And there's no lifelines. So moving around was a little risky for people in the cockpit and anybody to do any work outside the cockpit. So we our bow person's father was the main trimmer. So he's now watching and pointing at the people in the water. That was his assigned job. And Ian, then he said he's going to the radio. So he goes down below and I'm on the wheel and we're starting to organize and direct people to get the spinnaker down. We've got one person who's gone up by the leeward shrouds and kind of trying to mess with the jib to figure out what's going on up there. And then the rest of us are now sorted out trying to get the spinnaker down. Okay. Someone said starts the motor, and I'm like, absolutely not. Do not start the motor. Not until we are directed to. Then after a long period of time, it's blowing really hard now, and it's a struggle getting the kite in. We have to grind it. Oh, the leeward, the windward spin sheet that was rigged for the letterbox when we broached and the tack broke free, it wasn't on a winch. And so the tail went out through the boom and was no longer on the boat. So we had to grind the spin sheet all the way to the leeward corner and then start smoking the halyard out so we could get the spinnaker on board. And it was a wrestling match. And people were getting really tired with the grinding and the difficult angle and the boat bouncing in the waves. We finally got the spinnaker gathered and they were balling it up and passing it down below. Ian had been on the radio, and Ian, being a pilot, was very concise and precise and spoke clearly and was very good at communicating with all the people on the radio. So he was doing that, and the spinnaker was getting balled and pushed to the companionway to get pushed down below. During that time, I'm mentally checking the amount of time it's taking. And at this point, we really can't see, we can barely see the mom unit and really can't see the people in the water. So I'm looking across the top of the binnacle every few minutes just to make sure I have a mental bearing on where they are. So that's something that people should be conscious of. Okay, so now we get the spinnaker down below, the boat's more on its feet, and we're rolling up on the waves. We're laying the main fully out against the shrouds, ragging. Um, Now we're having to deal with the jib. And so the jib isn't just under the boat. The jib is under the boat, behind the keel, in front of the rudder, and it's caught on the sail drive.
Mm.
And that was almost a doomsday for us. That was a problem because we couldn't pull it from the leeward side. We finally got the boat hook and reached over from the weather side and grabbed some of the material. So now we've got sail up on both sides. and we can't pull it either way, and we're letting it down. We're so it's not tight against the sail drive. And once in a while the boat would go over a wave and the sail would separate from the bottom of the boat and the sail drive. But the sail's this giant bag of water, and pulling it and moving it a couple of inches was everything we could do. We tried getting a halyard on it, that wouldn't work, nothing. Finally, it's like, okay, we're cutting the sail in half. So the sail, being a heavier sail, was extremely hard to cut in half. No flat blade cut it. We had to use the sawtooth on a Leatherman to basically drag across the sail and cut it in like 4-inch increments. And once that was cut, we could pull, call it 60 or 70% of the sail up from the weather side. And now we've got this upper portion triangle under the boat, and it still isn't coming free. Meanwhile, in my head, still watching time and looking at bearing, I'm like, we are seriously running out of time. This has been, at this point, it's probably been pushing 30 minutes. And I'm like, these people are in real trouble. And we finally decided we were going to let it go. We let the weather side go, and we were going to just try to get the leeward side up to unshackle the halyard and or just cut it. And we went over a few waves, and all of a sudden the sail got away from the bottom of the boat. And so we pulled it, and finally the sail came free, and we pulled the other third of the sail up from the leeward side. And then it was like, okay, line check, absolutely nothing. Stripped a few lines, threw everything down below, started the motor, and immediately uh, had to tack the boat around with the motor and motor sail as fast as we could back to the scene. At that time, we're listening to the radio. There were people already now on scene. Lodos was literally picking them up the moment we were getting back to the scene, and we were back on site 40 minutes after the initial wipeout. And so the crew had been picked up by Lodos. They were then loaded onto the sheriff's boat, and then they were whisked away and taken to the Edmonds, which was the closest major harbor, and taken by aid car to the local hospital for hypothermia checks. Um, Yeah, so that's kind of the scenario. And some comments to that would be we had an experienced crew. There was no yelling. Everybody did what was directed. Everybody knew kind of what they were going to need to do. So it wasn't like a strange new command was given to them that they had no idea. We had a lot of talent on board. And, I've been sailing a long time, and to have someone go over, it was the first time we had someone go over. Um, to have two go over was a scenario you just don't think about.
Right.
And to then,
Especially you don't think about two people over and your boat disabled with the sails wrapped underneath it and sail drive and everything.
exactly, and to be that broken up or unable to control the situation was really kind of mind-boggling. Um, I raced high performance dinghies and high performance keelboats from 52s and 40s and 32s, and stuff happens, and lifelines break and people fall in the water or they slip and fall. But no, this was bad.
Remembering that some of the people who watch this video may not be as experienced with the high performance boats and what they're made of and things. A couple questions. What was that sail made of? What were
Mm.
some of your lines made of in terms of, you were talking about how difficult it was. Describe the materials that were involved.
It was a J3, number 3 jib. It was all carbon, and it was very heavy material and it's very, very strong. Um, I'm the one that actually cut the sail. I let go of the wheel at that point. And I think Ian was on deck and he grabbed the wheel and I ran forward and I just, we got the big knife off the pedestal and I ran up there and I was just going to be like the big pirate, just go cut it and be gone. No, it
Right.
was, it was very hard to cut. I was shockingly hard to cut. And that's why we ended up changing to like a sawtooth blade.
Right. And so, with that in mind, what advice would you give other people for, and kind of a series of questions here, but they're all tied together?
Yep.
What would you suggest to have in your damage control kit if you have a boat that has something like that on board? What would you suggest people practice? I don't know what you could practice ahead of time unless it's taking a piece of scrap material and seeing how hard it is to cut, and then associated with that safety at sea training in our damage control
Yeah.
module for safety at sea. Anything you would suggest that
Well,
we consider addressing?
yeah, I mean, ev- most people have a Leatherman, and so most people have that sawtooth blade, and it's maybe 3 inches long or something like that. I mean, in hindsight, you'd say, oh, well, let's get a super sawtooth type of blade and put it in the toolbox. Maybe. Um, maybe that's an option for just cutting these new heavier sails. Now, having said that, I don't know that there's really any way to practice that because if you got a scrap piece of material from your sailmaker, that's all fine and dandy. But this was a heavy sail and we were cutting through multiple layers
Mm-hmm.
of buildup. So it wasn't just a single layer. So I think it
Mm-hmm.
was a combination of both. I think
Okay.
you just need to plan on that sail's not going to cut as easy as you think it will.
Talk about the MOB equipment that you had on board and any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's our multifunction display that's mounted on the back of the house companionway. And this particular unit does not have a clear and obvious man overboard button. And that little white that's around button number one is highlighting in the red. If you were to look at it, that's the man overboard button. And I can tell you that even with all the experience I've had, I don't think I've ever seen this particular combination of buttons for an MOB. So it's not clear and precise and easily identified on what to do.
You mentioned that you were in the middle of everything, in the middle of trying to do damage control. You were trying to keep your eye on the people in the water who are floating away. I was just curious, approximately how long before they were out of your sight?
In that 15 to 20 minute period, I think at 15, you could still see him, but it's pretty faint. And, at that point there was background behind him, so you kind of knew where to look. But as we got closer to the 20 minute, maybe a little over 20 minute range, the man overboard module became hard to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, fortunately, we've got those pictures from the ferry, which really show that from a distance, from a distance, you don't see anything without the white caps. It was hard to even see sailboats as the
Well,
ferry was approaching.
and a comment on that is all the pictures from the ferry boat are not only on the upwind side, they're also on the up sun side. We
Yes.
were we were looking on the back side of the mom unit, so it was in shadow,
Okay.
in its own shadow. And so looking at a picture from the ferry, the sunlight's right on the surface and it would be much brighter.
Hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, from the ferry, you see that you had to get pretty close with the waves. You had to get pretty close to be even begin to differentiate the sailboats, the race boats,
Yeah.
from the wakes. And then when you got closer, initially you could see the mom eight, and you had to be fairly close for that. But you could just be almost on top of them before you actually saw the human beings hanging on to the mom eight. So,
Yeah.
boy, that was really a critical factor in there, that mom eight got out and got to them.
Yes. Yeah. Ian was um right on top of it. I mean, he immediately went to the mom unit, and then I just grabbed the wheel and, basically Ian was the owner, and obviously he's owner skipper. I'm the tactician and kind of oversee what's going on while racing. And Ian immediately took over and used his piloting experience and probably huge amounts of emergency situations and scenarios and simulations that he has to do as a pilot. And he absolutely did a great job.
Yes, it's amazing that he got the mom unit, especially when it misfired it or misdeployed
Right.
at first, that he got it out in time to get it to the people because you all were separating pretty quickly in those conditions, obviously.
Yeah,
So,
we were. And because of the boat's angle of heel, the mom unit did not deploy instantaneously out the bottom, but he just reached up and grabbed and pulled out some material, and then the thing deployed properly at that point. Maybe that it's just so much friction because it's packed in there so tight that it works great in a vertical mode, but when
mhm.
it's tied vertical on the boat and now the boat's laid over at 35, 40 degrees or whatever we were, it doesn't fall out as easy.
Yeah, and I think that's why they've gone to the new design called the Mom 8S, which has a ripcord that you pull and it kind of just deploys directly out.
Yeah.
So it will deploy even if it's on its side. So and I know that fisheries and the other chandleries here locally have they had quite a good business on Mom 8s after this incident of Bruce going.
Oh,
I
well,
want yeah.
that's
Mom
good to
mates,
know.
yeah, mom mates and Dan buoys. Everybody who saw the picture and heard the stories realized that that's the value of having something like that and practicing with it. Um, Next question. I know that Ian went down below and put out the Mayday on Channel 16, and I we had the opportunity to interview the ferry captain because I was curious how the information got to him, and he mentioned that he heard the Mayday call directly on Channel 16 from Ian, and that when Ian read out the latitude and longitude. Um, Fortunately, going to a Washington State ferry captain. I hadn't realized this, but to be a captain or first mate on a Washington State ferry, you have to be qualified as a class one pilot, meaning he's drawn a map of Puget
Right.
Sound from memory. So for him, you could read that latitude and longitude, and that's like giving somebody a street address.
Right.
They're at the corner of East Street and Elm.
Right.
So he heard it directly. But I was curious, do you know anything about the other conversations that Ian had on Channel 16? I assume the Coast Guard
There
came out.
was conversations going on, and it's kind of piecemealed in my mind because we were busy and we were
Hmm.
sails ragging and whatnot, and the VH we had a handheld on deck, and obviously that's great, but down below is a much better unit.
Hmm.
Um, I believe I don't think he talked to any other race boats, but I think he had conversations with the Kitsap County Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
And so those are the only two I think he actually spoke to, but Ian could answer that question.
Sure, sure. And I understand that afterwards, at the point where they were picked up, Sheridan and Brent said that you all had done some analysis, and I think that your boat had drifted a nautical mile away from where you started, and that the people in the water had drifted a third of a mile in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. We were definitely making so the boat was with the helm and the main ragging. I could sort of manipulate a little bit to make very small forward speed or actually sternway. And so when the kite was coming down, I got the boat turned and literally we're backing up as best we could to help reduce just the apparent wind and the load on the spinnaker as best we could.
Hmm.
I mean, it was at that point it was windy.
Hmm.
And so it was super noisy. The sails are wrecked. Anyway, it's just a really bad scenario.
Exactly, exactly. One of the things that you did that I thought was interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it before, um, was I understand that you made the decision intentionally not to hit the distress button that would have sent out the AIS signal of your location because you didn't want to confuse people on the difference between where blue was at that moment with where the people in the water were, instead choosing to have them focus on the last known position.
Yeah.
Uh, and we asked the ferry captain about that, and it didn't make any difference to him because again he got the latitude and longitude of the last known position, and that's where he immediately headed off to. And fortunately, again, he used to be a sailor, and so when he saw a couple boats doing figure eights around each other with their mains up, he knew that that must be where the people in the water were. But
Yep.
anyway, so I thought that was interesting, and something I probably wouldn't have thought about ahead of time is, hey, hitting the distress button for the AIS is not necessarily going to be helpful. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I have two thoughts. For Ian to consciously make the decision to not hit that button because it was our boat and not the people in the water is incredibly quick thinking.
Mm-hmm,
Okay, that is something everybody should think about and
mm-hmm,
maybe just in the back of their mind have that in their head because we separated from them fairly quickly.
mm-hmm,
My second point is everybody should invest in those personal AIS beacons. They
mm-hmm,
just need to come up with the money. You buy new foul weather gear. Yeah, it's expensive, but hey, what's pinpointing your location and broadcasting an MOB over AIS? Everybody on the water knows who's in the water and knows where you are. Hands down, done deal. On top of that, it would free up the spotter, the person on board who's
mm-hmm,
assigned to spot. It frees them up and allows them to now work and help clean up the mess, whatever it is. Because if you ever have an accident where people go over, there's going to be some sort of mess. You're trying to get sails down, you're trying to get lines out of the water, you're trying to do this as quick as possible. And in our case, we had a catastrophic situation, which would have helped. It would have just given us one more set of hands to clean it up. And how much time difference that makes, who knows? But it just would have been one more available hand.
mm-hmm. That's great.
Yep. Just people, especially people that go forward, master bow or boat owners, just get a few of those AISs.
Yeah, and hopefully somebody soon, maybe I can get some people to help me with this. I would love to test and see if it's possible to get AIS units that will work and deploy on one of the Mom 8s or one of the Dan buoys. You know.
Absolutely. And, yes, because if the mom unit goes over, there's going to be that location too. And in all reality, a boat called Absolutely heard the radio calls, knew the situation was bad, and they came all the way over to us. And I think at that time by the time they got to us, we had just gotten our spinnaker balled up and thrown below. And they came over to us and we're like, no, 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 no. And it's really windy. And so they really can't hear us. And we're pointing, going, no, two people in the water back over there. They literally tracked less than a quarter mile from the mom unit and people in the water, and they never saw it, which is a little bit scary.
It is, and yes, I think you see from so many of those pictures that, and without the Mom unit, and especially with both people wearing, you know, I know Sharon was wearing a foam life jacket that was blue, right? So,
Yeah.
and
Both
it was
people had regular PFDs, not inflatables.
right,
Yeah.
and the color difference. So, yeah, the value there. But the other thing that
I think in everyone's defense is if you're not looking for a mom unit, unless you're really close and the sun's bright and makes it really shine, you just aren't going to pick it up.
That's right. Oh, that's another good point for us to again feed back into safety at sea is teaching people what the mom eight and the Dan buoys look like, what that pylon looks like.
Yep.
Because a lot of people I've talked to who have rescued somebody when they didn't know what the thing was in the water. They sailed over because they were curious what this yellow pylon was out of the water and then found somebody attached to it. That's what
Yeah.
happened to Lindsay Lind when she went overboard.
Wow.
The people who
Boy,
rescued
that's
her just saw the
yeah.
pylon and were curious and came over and oh, there's a woman hanging on here.
Yeah, good grief. Man overboard. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought it
Um,
was also interesting in terms of the discussion of tethers and jack lines, because a lot of people say, well, you should always have tethers and jack lines. Well, obviously, number one, it wasn't required for the race, and number two, Sheridan and Brent both mentioned Sheridan especially says, you know what, I'm quite happy that I wasn't tethered in that situation since the boat went over the top of me. Um,
yeah, that could have been a really, really bad deal if she was, yeah, attached to a jack line and had like a 5 foot tether with a hook on it. She would have been trapped under the boat.
right. So that's a hard question.
Yeah.
On the other
Well,
hand, uh, after you had the damage and the sails overboard, what are your thoughts on would it have been nice to have had jack lines rigged at that point to tether into as you're trying to move around and do the cleanup?
uh, well. Sure. In hindsight, you say, "Oh, absolutely, hands down," or "Why didn't we? You should have." Like you say, it was only a 30-mile race, so it wasn't like it was
Right.
a distance race. It was just something that was going to be a 3, 4 hour race, well, 4 or 5 hour race, and the conditions didn't really, the forecast didn't really warrant that sort of situation. Okay.
Hmm.
That being said, with or without lifelines there, your tether is not going to make you feel any safer if you're trying to work your way along the leeward rail without lifelines. It's to keep you attached to the boat. It's not like you're in a climbing harness and you're suspended by it and you can lean
Hmm.
against it. It's just a tethering device.
Good point. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about some of those things because again, people who are not there are asking questions,
Yep.
but you can see certainly from the standpoint of Sheridan and maybe Brent that if you know that you're going to go for a swim underneath the boat, a lot less enthusiasm for wearing a tether. The challenge is you never know.
Well, that's just it. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, um, you can talk to, and you would know better than I, but I bet you if you reviewed 100 man overboard cases, only a couple ever went under the boat.
Hmm. Right.
And so that was just part of our very extreme wipeout.
Yeah.
So on the starboard side, there are two stanchions between the shrouds and the forestay.
Hmm.
Those two, the jib was laying down that side of the boat. We were on port jibe. And that the stanchion, the vertical stanchion, literally broke right off. And so all the lifelines themselves now are completely slack.
Hmm.
Now, from the shrouds aft, we had stanchions, but the lifelines were wet noodles. They had, you know, 12 feet or 15 feet of slack in them. They were
Hmm.
useless.
Hmm. So you lost this part of
That
the bow,
broke.
the
That
bow
broke
pulpit.
right off. And so all that material was swept aft and kind of all got tangled up around the shrouds and the next stanchion back.
Okay.
And so with that being gone, obviously the bow person and the mast person, I used to do bow when I was younger, and you just know that lifeline's there, and so you trust it. And the boat goes over a wave and you slide the lure and it's like, okay, no problem. Worst thing I do, my feet go through, but I get hung up in the lifeline or something, right? But when
Hmm.
it's gone, all of a sudden the world changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can see it, you can see it easier on the side closest to us, but you even have the lacing there,
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah,
for extra protection. But when the stanchions go, the lifelines go. When the lifelines go, the lacings go. Yeah,
yep,
Sheridan was talking about how she expected to hit something on her way over. She expected to be stopped by stanchions or lifelines, or she was joking she even expected to, to slam into Brent, but there was nothing.
yeah. And it happened so fast.
Mhm. All right. This has been very helpful. Any last advice for safety at sea training for other people to think about, for us?
Half second, just look at um, what were some of our mistakes? Um, so as a skipper in hindsight, I look back on the scenario. After we jibed onto port and we said, okay, staysail down, jib up, and then we were going to do the letterbox.
Mhm.
We'd had some good sized puffs in the mid 20s, but I mean, in hindsight, we could have just said, hey, just bald head it, just letterbox it, and then we'll put a jib up later. But we didn't. So that's one. Um, The other one is, and this one is a rigging thing for the letterbox. After it gets pulled through the boom and through a snatch block on deck, then there's a tail that sticks out. And depending on how big your boat is and things like that, whether it's on a winch or you pull it by hand and so on and so forth. The question is, would you think about pulling whatever, 10 or 15 feet? Because you end up pulling quite a bit of slack on that weather sheet and pull it through 10 or 15, 20 feet and put like a quick slip knot in it. Because when the Martin breaker or tack line released, that whole thing just ran out and it was gone because the clue of the sail went flipping off the leeward and it just whipped it right out of the boat. And if there was a knot in there, you'd still have it. You have long enough tail. We could have ground the spinnaker in through that um, letterbox sheet, which then would have put it more behind the main. Maybe we could have gotten it down sooner. That's that's just a discussion point. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that one.
Sure. Right.
We talked about the knife and a saw, the difference. Um, Clear radio communications, the mom unit not being super visible as we would thought, and the personal AIS is those are the critical things. And in all reality, I thought we were back on site, literally back on site where they were in the water in literally exactly 40 minutes. Now, we know the water temperature that day was like 47, 48, and we know at 40 minutes, those people are going to be approaching catatonic with hypothermia.
Mhm.
And it would have been a real struggle for us to get them back on board. We would have done it. I mean, you do whatever you have to.
Right.
But the whole time I was petrified in my mind that it was going to turn out worse than it did.
Absolutely. And that must have been a distraction to everybody on board. I can't imagine what Sheridan's dad was,
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. He was clearly affected by it. Um yeah. He got distracted a number of times and it was totally understandable. Absolutely. And
exactly.
and this just speaks for the experience of the crew. We all know the time allowance and we all know what mess we had. And yet nobody freaked out. Everybody did their job. Meanwhile, subconsciously, everybody knew we were fighting the clock.
Hmm.
From the moment it happened,
Hmm.
we were on the clock.
Hmm. And the good news is, thanks to you and your, the seamanship of your crew there, as well as the seamanship of the other boats involved, we had such a positive outcome.
Yeah.
and that they both survived. But taking a step back, it really was so many people on so many boats doing the right thing. It wasn't the result of the action of any single boat. It was, it was what you did on Blue. It was what Freya did in finding them. It was what Lodos did and
Yeah.
dropping their sails and picking them up. It was what the ferry did by coming and position themselves upwind.
Yes.
It was
It
it was
was,
all
like
those
I
things.
said, in my mind, it was turning into a unspeakable situation.
Yes.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
One more lesson, and this is for any of the boats that are rescuing and they throw over the life sling and things like that. You need to stop your boat. The people in
Yeah.
the water repeatedly talk about how these people, these boats that are rescuing them, are doing everything in their power, and sometimes they think, oh, I got to get them right now, and they're going way too fast. You literally need to get the boat speed down to 1 knot. As maybe you go a little faster as you're circling around, but the moment you get to weather and you're dragging that life sling, you need to almost stop the boat.
Yes.
And the people in the water either grab the line or they grab the life sling and then they can be pulled aboard. But you can't imagine that they're having to hang on to something and they're a giant bag of water and they are dragging it. They cannot hold with that kind of speed through the water. And the people that are rescuing need to keep that in mind.
Lucky to have some of the video showing that because we're going to continue to emphasize that in the Lifesling training.
So I know some of the offshore races we've been doing, that I've been doing, you have to do the man overboard drill. And, some people may take it seriously and some might take that drill a little less seriously. And I would emphasize that you need to take it seriously. So just imagine our scenario, which is not completely out of the realm. Stuff in the bow, jibs up there, it breaks all the lifelines, the people go over. What if it was in the middle of the ocean? What if it was in the middle of the ocean at night? Those are the two scenarios that pretty much take that to a no-win scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's take your man overboard practices seriously, and it's not a joke. The safety at sea courses, I don't know, I've done 3 of them now and just do the renewal, but the time in the pool is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of, and each time I do it, somebody might say something that I hadn't really thought about before. I might pick up something that was different from here and there, but you should do it. Do those safety at sea because you will realize that your inflatable is not that comfortable. Your inflatable fills up, and now all of a sudden you don't really have much vision. You're going to float great. Your inflatable gets in the way as you're trying to get in and out of the life raft. Your inflatable is in the way when you're trying to turn your life raft back right side up. Yeah, but you need it. You need something. It's either a foam PFD or inflatable. That's a personal choice.
Right. And
Take it seriously because it can happen, and it can happen really fast. Over the years, I've been sailing all my life, and for the first 30 years, you never had a call of man overboard. And now all of a sudden, in the last 20 years, more and more and more. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, what? People aren't hanging on. I don't get it. And then all of a sudden it happens to us. And You hear of people falling between the lifelines and sliding out, or they were going under the boom and slipped and just continued right out and things like that. But in our situation, it was like the hand of God just went whoosh,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was eye-opening. I was terrified I would have to go and talk to Brent, our masked man. He's a young man, and I would have to go talk to his mom. And that was horrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does put everything in perspective.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you taking the time to share this, Scott. This is huge.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's little tidbits I left out, but you know, yeah. Hopefully the video turns out good and people can learn from it.